Hello everybody, I'm your host Mr. Wildcat. Hope you all have a wonderful day today. Today we're going to be continuing our look back at Arizona's time in the Pac-12, and we are going to be, normally we do a top 10 list for this type of stuff, but not enough material to compile a full top 10, so we're doing a top 5. And I know that some of these seasons, you made the right choice, that definitely should have been on there. Others said, hey, that should have been on there. And then there's others that'll be like, that should have been higher, or hey, that should have been lower than that. Okay, you guys may agree or disagree with some of the seasons that are on the list and how they're ranked. And if you guys have a season that was not mentioned, or if you disagree with any part of this list, please make your comments known in the comment section below. Okay. So for this list, the main criteria is strictly Arizona Wildcats time in the Pac-12 from 1978 to 2023. Okay, and I do have to confess that a good part of this list does favor the later part because Mr. Wildcat has only been a fan of the Arizona. I've only been a part of the Wildcat family for 20 years. Not even that. This will be my 20th year as a Wildcat. This upcoming season, our first year going into the Big 12, will be my 20th season with the Wildcats. So I'm not much experienced prior to that. So you have to forgive me if you don't see a lot of earlier seasons on this list. But there is, believe me, there is a season or two in my older days that will be on here. And you'll definitely agree with those years, okay? And one other thing to say, this was not part of the criteria, but coincidentally, every single season that is on this list just happened to have had a Wildcat victory over the Sun Devils in the Territorial Cup and a bowl bid to go with it. Okay? Ready? Let us begin. Starting at number 5 on the list is the 2009 season. All right? Why is this one on the list? Well, Arizona had just come off a huge 2008 season, which gave them their first bowl bid in a whole decade. Okay, they went 7-5 in the season, beat the Sun Devils for the first time in 4 years, and went on to the Vegas Bowl, where they wound up beating the BYU Cougars, and to this date is the last time that we've ever beaten BYU. And basically, okay, it gave the Wildcats an 8-5 victory, 8-5 record for the season. We took that into this season, this particular season, and we went even higher than that. Okay, and we became very noticeable to the country, saying, "Hey, it took us a decade, but we're back, and we're here to dominate." Okay, so this season was our introduction to quarterback Nick Foles. He made his introduction in the game against Iowa, and unfortunately, he was put into the game too late in the game for us to have a chance at a victory. That game over Iowa in Week 3, that was a 27-17 loss. Okay, up in Kinnick Stadium in Iowa City. Okay, and that was on national TV. So Matt Scott, our primary quarterback, he made he made some big mistakes that could have put the Wildcats on the winning side. So they threw him out and they put Nick Foles in. And Nick Foles did so well, they decided to keep him on for a vast majority of the remainder of the season. Okay? And from that point forward, we wind up getting some huge victories in the process. We wind up getting a victory over Oregon State, it would be our last victory over Oregon State in 6 years. We wouldn't beat them again until 2015. We'd also have a victory over Stanford, which would be our last time we played them. We would beat them in 15 years. It would be 14 years, that is. My apologies. So we wouldn't beat them again until 2023. And part of the reason why we we hadn't, in our defense, we hadn't really played them half the time in between, because once we went to the Pac-12, With the way the divisions were aligned, we didn't play Stanford. We only played Stanford half the time. 2 years, you would play Stanford, a home and home versus Stanford. Then you would do a home and home versus Cal. Then a home and home versus Stanford. You would do home and homes between Cal and Stanford, alternating. Okay, so it was very hard to play them. And unfortunately, during those times that we would actually play Stanford, they would either be at the top of the game with Andrew Luck being the quarterback and Jim Harbaugh being their coach, or it would be a time where the Wildcats would be in a rebuilding stage. Okay. Either way, we were screwed. So that was we got victory over Stanford. We got a victory over Oregon State. We even had a sweep. We swept the LA schools. Okay, and this was the last time that we ever do that. Okay, USC is a school that Arizona has had the worst time beating. Okay, we've only beaten them 8 times in program history. We did play them a handful of times during the 1910s and 20s prior to USC joining the Pac, because USC was independent in their early years. So they would be on Arizona's schedule for a little bit. But the Wildcats would not have any luck against USC until 1981. And most of our victories would come in the 1990s. After that, we would have like 99 and 2000. We had back-to-back wins in there. And then we went into the Coliseum in the final week. We wound up beating them. It happened to be Pete Carroll's final conference game coaching USC prior to leaving for the Seattle Seahawks. Okay, he left because shit was about to hit the fan for USC, and knowing that he was part of it, he wanted nothing to do with it. He wanted nothing to do with the consequences that was about to come. He just had to run away from his own problems. Okay, but Wildcats did come up with a victory with that. Okay, another reason why this is on the list is the fact we had the game. The Wildcats were nationally ranked for the first time in 9 years. Okay, after our victory over Stanford, it was either Stanford or UCLA. Okay. Yeah. After we beat Stanford on October 17th, we joined the national ranks. We were number 22 in the country. We would take it because it's better than what we had encountered at any point during the time. Let's see. We were number 22. So you were okay. And then we were number 18 the following week after beating UCLA at home, we would become the number 18 school in the country with a homecoming game against Washington State. We beat them 48-7, and that was an easy game for the Wild. That's probably one of the easiest games for the Wildcats because Washington State was still in rebuild mode. And then the following week, we would head up to Berkeley, play Cal, and unfortunately, we came up just short, and that erased Arizona's that wiped Arizona's national rankings off the face of the earth at least for the time being. Another huge reason why this season is on my list is because it was one of the few times where College Game Day came to Tucson. Okay, in what was probably considered the game of the decade for the Wildcats. November 21st, 2009, Arizona Wildcats were hosting the Oregon Ducks. This game not only had ESPN College Game Day in town, but the game got picked up for ABC's Saturday night primetime slot at 8 o'clock at night. Why was this game such a big deal? Because the Wildcats and the Ducks were in a deadlock for first place in the conference. Winner of this game controlled their destiny not only for the Pac-10 championship, but also for that Rose Bowl bid, something the Wildcats have been eager for after all these years. Unfortunately, the Wildcats did have the lead in the final seconds of the fourth quarter, but Oregon came back and they tied it up, taking the game to overtime. In fact, it went to double overtime, where the Oregon Ducks unfortunately beat the Wildcats 44-41. That was a heartbreaker for the Wildcats, but the Wildcats should have been very proud of themselves because they wound up beating schools they would never have encountered a win against. Okay, they did finish up with a 20-17 victory in the Territorial Cup at Arizona State, followed by a win at the LA Memorial Coliseum in its final week of the season against number 18 USC, 21-17. This was like I said, it was the last time that the Wildcats. It was the last time Pete Carroll had coached a conference game for USC, and it would also be the Wildcats' final victory at the LA Coliseum. Okay, Wildcats got nationally ranked at the end of the regular season, going into the bowl game, where they wound up meeting with Nebraska in the Holiday Bowl, and unfortunately for the Wildcats, they were hard after beating ASU and USC. They realized how close they were to the Rose Bowl, and deep inside, I think they threw that game in protest because the team got shut out 33-0 in the Holiday Bowl. Okay. Holiday Bowl is somewhat of a curse because I know that team, they worked so hard and they really deserved that conference title and the Rose Bowl. But after everything got sorted out, the Wildcats finished number 2 in the conference. It was a three-way tie for second place: the Wildcats, the Beavers, and the Cardinal. And the Wildcats own the tiebreakers over Stanford and Oregon State. That's how they got the number 2 spot. All right. So as a recap, number 5 was the 2009 season. All right. Number 4 on the list, 2014. All right. What did this season entail? The Hail Mary against Cal, our conference opener. We were at home. It was we decided to do a whiteout. All right. Cal pretty much led the entire game. Final play of the game. Wildcat, okay? We were way too far out to do a field goal. We were down by 2 points. We were too far out to even attempt a field goal. So we decided to throw. So we're about like 50, 60 yards out. We throw a Hail Mary pass into the end zone. Wildcats receive the ball, stay in bounds. The touchdown is good. The Wildcats came out with a 49-45 victory over Cal. Okay. Following week, Thursday night game in Oregon. Oregon, the number 2 school in the country. Nobody's giving Arizona a chance. But the Wildcats, they go in there. They pull a huge upset, taking out the number 2 school in the country. Okay. This particular game put the Wildcats on the map, and it made everybody know. Like the pollsters who tried everything they could to keep the Wildcats off the rankings, there is no ignoring them now. All right. Let's take a look at who their resume, or okay, 2014. So. Nevada, Las Vegas, Texas, San Antonio, and Nevada. All right, those were our 3 non-conference games for the year. Okay, yeah, they're not the brightest games out there, but okay, our conference wins over Cal and Oregon put them in a position where they could no longer be ignored. Wildcats received the number 10 they went in with the number 10 spot in the national rankings after that win over Oregon. So they went from non-ranked to number 10. Okay. Fortunately for the Wildcats, Wildcats would have a heartbreaking loss over USC. So most of the time over the past decade, Wildcats have had very bad luck over USC, and most of those matchups were within one scoring possession, but that it was in more than one. It was within one scoring possession. Okay, and the Wildcats just coming just shy of the victory. Okay, so that pushed us down just a little bit, but we redeemed ourselves with a blowout at Washington State. Okay, by the time we went to Pasadena, we lost to UCLA, but we recovered ourselves. And going into November, after the UCLA game, the Wildcats pretty much had to win the rest of the way out just to have a shot. The Wildcats still had a chance of winning the South Division, but in order to do that, they had to win. They couldn't afford any more losses. They had to win the rest of the way out. Okay? Plus a few other factors had to go in the process as well. Okay? But they recovered. Wildcats had victories over Colorado, Washington, Utah, and Arizona State. Now, might I add, that victory over Washington that year be the last time the Wildcats would ever beat the Huskies. Yeah. And that came on a field goal in the final seconds, which the Wildcats scored. Okay. That game kept the Wildcats in the running. And by the time we got to the Territorial Cup game against Arizona State, there was a few other factors that went into play because we had lost. Because Arizona lost to USC and UCLA, they both owned tiebreakers over the Wildcats. But once everything got all sorted out, the final 2 minutes of the Territorial Cup in 2014 turned into a playoff for the Pac-12 South. Winner of the Territorial Cup took home the divisional title. And with Arizona State being the defending divisional champions, they're looking for a repeat, which the Wildcats refused. A 42-35 victory marked Arizona's first victory at Sun Devil Stadium. Their first victory against ASU since 2011 up at Sun Devil Stadium. It was also their first victory at home since 2008, my senior year. Okay. Well deserved. Wildcats landed themselves a Pac-12 South Divisional title and a right to a rematch over Oregon in the Pac-12 championship game. Now, that year was the first time that the Pac-12 championship game was being played at a neutral site. Previous to that, we played at the school with the better conference record, but after getting feedback from Oregon, Stanford, and Arizona State, all of whom had hosted the conference championship game in the past, okay, they realized they needed to go with a neutral site. And coincidentally, the 49ers had just opened up a new stadium not far from Pac-12 headquarters. So it was a no-brainer. That's put the conference championship game at Levi Stadium. Unfortunately for the Wildcats, it was a blowout. Oregon picked up the victory. We went into that game number 7 in the country, losing 51-13, but all was not lost. Wildcats did not go home empty-handed. They did land themselves a New Year's Six bowl game that year against Boise State in the Fiesta Bowl, and I had the honors of going to that bowl game. Okay, the Wildcats things didn't go for the Wildcats as they expected, and they wound up coming up short. 38-30 was that score. Okay, but Wildcats they had their best year since '98, and they have put themselves at a new level, saying we are national contenders. Come and get us, baby. So that's why number 4 on the list was this 2014 was number 4 on the list. Coming at number 3, our most recent year, the final year of the Pac, 2023. We don't really have to go much into it. especially for those of you who have been Wildcat fans recently. But I know that many of you guys are not Wildcat fans, so I have to draw the seeds. So Wildcats, okay, they were in the process of rebuilding themselves. Okay, Kevin Sumlin, after Rich Rod got fired after the 2017 season for a fraudulent sexual harassment suit, they brought in Kevin Sumlin from Texas A&M, thinking that we were going to get a national contender. What we got was a national embarrassment, and we got a coach that literally tanked our team down the toilet. Okay, so he took our team from like 7-5 team in the regular season down to 5-7, 4-8, and eventually a winless record in 2020. Okay, and he was finally fired after an embarrassing loss to Arizona State on our home field. At that point, they said, "We've had enough. You're fired." They brought in this guy, Jed Fish. Most of us had never heard of him, and quite honestly, all right, a lot of people weren't too excited for him. He didn't have a lot of talent. He didn't have a lot of talent. Okay, most of the people on his rosters were pretty much recruits from Sumlin's time. And what we wound up getting, his first year was a complete was a huge embarrassment because we wound up going 1-11. We wound up losing to Northern Arizona University. If you can't beat NAU, you should not be coaching U of A. Okay, but they kept him on because they just spent a shitload of money on firing Kevin Sumlin and buying out his contract, so they couldn't get rid of him, and they had to keep him on. But over time, he started to gain the respect. Okay, 2022 went from 1-11 in 2021 up to 5-7 in 2022. We upset UCLA at the Rose Bowl. Okay, and that game right there, plus the Territorial Cup in 2022, those were the turning stones for the Wildcats going into this year. Now, of course, some people thought, hey, we're going to be national contenders. They're going to go 12-0. Yeah, and I could see Russia from my house. I was very cautious. 6-6, 7-6 at the most. Wildcats have hardly done any better than that. So I was being very cautious. Okay. Wildcats in 2023. Excuse me while I pull up that. Very dominating. Okay. So the Wildcats. Okay. We blew out NAU on our home court, so you have to beat NAU. Okay, it was a narrow loss the last time, but this time around it was 38-3. So we literally blew them out, and then we wound up going out to Mississippi State. It was our final home and it was our final game in the home and home. That game wound up going. Mississippi State rolled all over us the last time when they were in Tucson in 2022, but in 2023, went to Mississippi State. We forced overtime, and unfortunately, Mississippi State wound up scoring. They scored a touchdown in the overtime, and we could not convert. Okay. Then we wound up coming back. We hosted UTEP. Okay, a blowout, 31-10. Then we went up to Stanford. We beat Stanford for the first time since 2009, and it was a 21-20 win. We had a very hard time beating that, right? It was at that point we decided to change quarterbacks. Okay, I believe it was quarterback. Okay, Jaden Alora was our starting quarterback. All right, and then you had Noah Fifta. Okay. Delora got injured, and FIFA took over, and he was the hero of the game. And they decided to keep him on. All right? Rightfully so. Okay? Wildcats. coming back here. Okay. Wildcats would have, we would come back to Tucson, a narrow loss to the Washington Huskies. This was a game we were not expected to win, but the Wildcats did much better than expected, especially against a top 10 nationally ranked Washington Huskies team. Okay, so Wildcats almost won that one too. Okay, then they headed out to the LA Coliseum, their final game against USC, and this, oh my God, this was probably the game of the year. All right, and the Wildcats they tried so hard to win this, and they could have won this, and they should have won it. But knowing how biased the refs are at USC, they wouldn't let it happen. Wildcats, we took a 14-0 lead, and just like if you blink the wrong way, USC will kick you in the nuts, and they erased that deficit real quick. Okay. The game was tied at the end of the fourth, towards the end of the fourth quarter, and all they had to do was score, and all USC had to do was kick a field goal, and that would have ended it. The kick was denied, so we go to overtime. Okay, game still tied after that, so we go to double overtime. Starting double overtime, touchdowns have to be followed by 2-point conversions. Okay, still tied after that. So then we had the triple overtime. Triple overtime is just the 2-point conversion. All right. Triple overtime and onward, it's only the 2-point conversion. USC scores first, they go up 2 points. Wildcats have to convert to win, they come up short. USC, okay, Arizona had their hearts broken. 43-41, triple overtime loss. But and that just happened to have been the last game the Wildcats would lose for the year. They would win the rest of the way out. Washington State, Oregon State. They blew out Washington State, which was nationally ranked. They beat Oregon State. All right, okay. And then they came back to homecoming and they blew out nationally ranked UCLA. At that point, you can't ignore the Wildcats anymore. They're back on a roll. After the UCLA game, the Wildcats are nationally ranked for the first time since Rich Rod. All right? Plus, might I add, that victory over UCLA also gave the Wildcats a bowl bid. They put the Wildcats at 6-6, which they put them in 6 wins, which was enough to be bowl eligible. All they do is win 7 to be guaranteed another game. They barely beat Colorado the following week up in Boulder with a game-winning field goal in the final seconds. They come back to Tucson and blow out nationally ranked Utah. Then they go up to Tempe and they blow out Arizona State, 59-23. Wildcats that year, all right. Wildcats finished number 3rd in the country. They finished number 3rd in the conference, okay. And unlike 2014, the Pac-12 had realigned the division. They realigned its formats for the conference championship game. It was no longer by divisional lineup. They gone to an allegiance. So the top 2 schools in the conference with the best conference records, regardless of which division you're from, got to play in the conference championship game. The Wildcats fell short. That loss to USC could have put a huge damper in Arizona's chances at the. Okay, They got cheated out of a divisional championship because there was no divisional championships no more. But if they had still had it, the Wildcats would have had a self-divisional. They would have walked away with a divisional championship for the second time in the conference history. Wildcats finished. The Wildcats did finish third place in the conference. And while the Washington Huskies land themselves in the college football playoff with a win over Oregon, and Oregon land themselves. Where did they go that year? Oh, they wound up in the Fiesta Bowl. So they got a New Year's Six bowl game. The Wildcats, they land themselves in the Elmo Bowl against the Oklahoma Sooners. First time they played Oklahoma since 1989, and guess what? The Wildcats rode all over them. All right? Just as expected. Okay? 38-24, the final score. Wildcats wound up finishing 10-3 overall. All three games in that particular season were all decided within one scoring possession. Okay? You had two touchdowns and a missed and a 2-point conversion was the main difference between 10-3 and the national champion and a college football playoff appearance. Okay, so that's and the Wildcats. They went into the Elmo Bowl, number 14 in the country. They finished They finished number 11 in the country. And they also, might I add, finished with the second longest active winning streak in all of college football at 7 games. And for those of you wondering, what is the only other school that what is the only other school that had a longer winning streak than the Wildcats? That's Michigan. Your national champions. Yeah. So, Arizona's got has a lot riding on itself going into the upcoming season. Okay? You have a lot of schools out there that have won a whole shitload of games. And their winning streaks have been erased by either losing their bowl game or losing towards the end of the season. Okay? Or even losing the college football playoff, too, might I add. So, that is... Okay. So the Wildcats, they finished the Pac-12 on a high note. Okay. So, we're down to number 2. This is a season you guys are probably going to agree with. 1993, Desert Swarm. Okay? I was a little kid, still living in New York when this went on. So I'm not too familiar with this season. So if I miss anything here, I'm expecting you Wildcat fans who are rooting for the Wildcats during that particular time to fill in the gaps. All right? But basically, the reason why the Wildcats this season is on the list is because the Wildcats finished 10-2 overall, a 3-way tie for first place in the Pac-10. So they actually won a conference championship in the process. Okay? They wound up having to share with USC and UCLA. And unfortunately, after all the tiebreakers got sorted out, UCLA got the Rose Bowl, but the Wildcats didn't go home empty-handed. They got to play in the Fiesta Bowl against the Miami Hurricanes, which around this point, the Hurricanes dynasty, which they had built in the early 80s, starting to fall apart. The Wildcats ripped them apart, 29-0 in a national televised audience. Okay, and the Wildcats were nationally ranked the whole way through. Okay, so they started off number 13 in the country, winning. Okay, Texas El Paso, Pacific California, and Illinois. Okay, those were our three non-conference games. Had victories at Oregon State. They beat USC 38-7, one of their biggest victories over the Trojans ever. Stanford 27-24. Washington State 9-6. First loss of the year came at UCLA in the Rose Bowl, in what was their only blowout, 37-17. Okay. So Arizona still perfect. Went to the Rose Bowl to face UCLA. Was ranked number 7 in the country. Arizona had his quarterback injured early, and the Bruins started on a roll. Wildcats could not recover, and UCLA cruised to a victory to give the Wildcats their first loss to end their perfect record. Okay. Then they went on to play the Oregon Ducks, and this was back at Tucson. This was a homecoming game, 31-10 the final score. After seeing UCLA end their unbeaten hopes, Arizona returned home for a homecoming matchup. They would improve on all phases and used mostly a Russian attack. Desert Swarm defense returned to dominance and shut down the Ducks. The Wildcats got back in the win column. It turned out to be the final home game of the year for the Arizona Wildcats. With the win, Arizona completed a perfect season at home, winning all 6 of its games. Okay? Then the Wildcats would go on the road and play at Cal. Arizona would come out hot, leading 20-0 at the half, and was poised to take control of the Pac-10 and edging closer to a possible chance at the Rose Bowl. But in the second half, the Golden Bears slowly began to come back, and the Wildcats, believing that the game was over due to their halftime lead, began to play conservative in the fourth quarter, trying to drain much of the clock. Later in the quarter, the Wildcats threw an interception. Cal returned for a touchdown, taking a 24-20 lead with over 3 minutes remaining. On Arizona's final drive, they went into Cal territory, but Golden Bears' defense came up big to complete the comeback for a huge upset, and Tommy and the Wildcats went to the locker room stunned at what the fuck just happened. The loss dropped the Wildcats to third place in the Pac-10, right behind UCLA and USC, cost them any chance at the Rose Bowl, as the winner of the UCLA-USC game the following week earned the Rose Bowl trip, which was eventually won by UCLA. Arizona State, they traveled to Tempe for their rivalry game in the Territorial Cup, trying to recover from their loss at California, which ended their Rose Bowl hopes. The Wildcats started slow but took control, and the Desert Storm dominated the Sun Devils as they pulled away, ending a 2-game losing streak in the rivalry and clinching a share in the Pac-10 title. The win puts the Wildcats in a position to be selected for the Fiesta Bowl, in which they accepted, and they would play Miami. Okay. As well, in addition to this, New Year's Day 1994, that's when the Hurricanes and Wildcats played in the Fiesta Bowl. It was a big test. Wildcats' first Fiesta Bowl since 1979, the Desert Swarm would show why they were the nation's best by shutting down Miami's explosive offense in front of a pro-Arizona crowd. Wildcats played well and would score a long rushing touchdown before halftime to give them a 16-0 lead. Desert Swarm would continue to dominate the Hurricanes in the second half. Arizona put more points on the board, and they captured the victory with the Swarm pitching a shutout. It was the first shutout in the history of the Fiesta Bowl. Okay, might I add, okay, that year the Wildcats had 4 players drafted into the National Football League. Chuck Levy went to the Arizona Cardinals. Rob Wardrop went to the Kansas City Chiefs. Roderick Lewis went to the Houston Oilers, and Bryant Boyer went to the Miami Dolphins. Teddy Bruschi was a first-team All-Pac-10, along with Sean Harris. And as for Rob Wardrop, he was Pac-10's Defensive Player of the Year, first-team All-Pac-10. Okay. Yada, yada, yada. This season was the first time in program history the Wildcats won at least 10 games in a single season, breaking a then record of 9. Since then, they would have, well, this is not up to date, but there would be 3 more 10-win seasons: 1998, 2014, and most recently 2023. Okay? So that is why the 1993 Wildcats are my number 2 pick. All right? Now, before we go into our number 1 pick, which I know that all you diehard Wildcats fans, you know exactly what year, which season it is. Okay? But before we do, make sure you hit that subscribe button to the channel. There's more videos coming out regarding Arizona's time in the Pac-12, including my biggest video, Arizona's most memorable football games and moments during their time in the Pac-12, which will be coming up shortly. So be on the lookout for that. But make sure you subscribe so that you are one of the first to watch. All right? Ready for number 1? $1998. Right. All right. Now, this season, the Wildcats finished a record 12-1, their best record ever. All right. But of course, many of you guys are probably not aware of what happened that season. So we're going to go into it for you. All right. And why they were the number 12 team why they were 12-1 for the year. All right. Now, basically, Dick Tomlin was in his 12th season. Wildcats captured this 12-1 record, 7-1 against Pac-10 opponents. Arizona's first 11 or more win. It was Arizona's first and only 11 or more win season in school history, and the best record to date, surpassing the 93's record of 10 wins. Okay? They had one loss for the year, which was UCLA on October 10th, okay, who was then the number 3 school in the country, okay? Wildcats elected, now during this time, like prior to 2006, you only played an 11-game schedule, all right? And you played an 8-game conference schedule, and you played 3 conference opponents. Wildcats that year, they played a 4th conference opponent. They played a 4th non-conference game. They had Hawaii, and they had Iowa and San Diego State, and they also had Northeast Louisiana. Okay. Many of these games were huge blowouts. Okay. And they were also they were nationally ranked throughout the entire year, might I add. Okay. So they started off with Hawaii, number 24 in the country, blowing out 27-6. Then they went to Stanford, began conference play, 31-14. We beat them there. Then we come back to Tucson. We beat Iowa 35-11. We then head up to Qualcomm to play San Diego State, 35-16. We then head up to Washington, Seattle, Husky Stadium. We beat. This is the leap over the lake, I believe, is what it's called. Right. On the road in Seattle, the Wildcats faced Washington in a tough environment. Both teams would hang with each other in terms of scoring, and by the fourth quarter, the Huskies took the lead and were poised to pull the upset. On Arizona's final drive, however, they would get closer to the end zone and a chance for survival in the closing seconds. Quarterback Ortiz Jenkins ran the ball, tried to dive into the end zone, took a low hit around the shin area, and front flipped across the goal line for the game-winning touchdown with 6 seconds left, and Arizona remained unbeaten and won against Washington for the first time since their big upset over them in 1992. And might I add, this is called the leap over the lake, in what they leaped into the end zone, okay? And this game right here gained the momentum for the Wildcats, okay, and helped them push their need for to succeed, okay. Following week, we would go to Come back to Tucson, we play UCLA. Oh my lord. Okay. Okay, after winning the Wild One in Washington, the Wildcats returned home for their next game against third-ranked UCLA. It was a big test for both teams in a battle between the two undefeated top 10 teams. Arizona was number 10 at the time, with the winner taking control of the Pac-10. Arizona started with would start off the game with an early 14-7 lead before the Bruins answered back. Both teams would trade scores back and forth, which led the score to be tied at halftime. Okay? And then in the second half, the Wildcats regained the lead 28-24 before UCLA took it back in the final minute of the quarter before the game turned into the fourth. During the fourth quarter, Arizona tried to respond but would make turnovers that would lead to the Bruins scoring for good. More mistakes by Arizona led to another touchdown led by the Bruins to break the game open, and the Wildcats never recovered. With a 52-28 win, UCLA showed why they were the contention for the national championship, and it ended the Wildcats' chance at a perfect season, just like they did in 1993. Okay. Then the Wildcats, they wound up heading out. They headed up to Corvallis to play Oregon State, a 28-7 blowout. Coming back to Tucson, a 45-7 blowout to Northeast Louisiana. Then they hosted the Oregon Ducks on October 31st, 38-3 blowout against number 12 Oregon. Then homecoming November 7th against the Washington State Cougars, 41-7 blowout. We then head up to Cal. At this point, okay, unlike the last time, we would actually come up with a victory on this one, 27-23. Then we would come back to Tucson for the Territorial Cup, a 50-42 win. Okay. Now, even after the Wildcats beat Arizona State, there is still the possibility of the Wildcats getting to play in the Rose Bowl. And it's because UCLA was undefeated at the time. Or we thought we were. Okay? Now, here's the thing. UCLA had a non-conference game against the Miami Hurricanes at the very beginning of the season. And it was supposed to be in Miami. The game got canceled. Okay? The game was called off because of a hurricane that was coming through the area. And the game had to be rescheduled. The only time that they could reschedule it was at the end of the regular season. It was the only time where both UCLA and Miami were available. So they wound up playing their rescheduled matchup a week after the regular season came to an end. This is around the same time you would normally have conference championship week or something like that. Okay. Now all UCLA had to do was beat Miami, and it would have put UCLA in the contention for. It would have put UCLA in the BCS National Championship game, and the Arizona Wildcats, who were right below them, would have gotten the Rose Bowl. But now, they wind up losing 49-40. It was a very close game. Okay, and of course, College Game Day was in Miami that week because there was a national championship appearance on the line for UCLA. Miami they came out with a victory, 49-45. So that victory right there knocked UCLA out of the national championship matchup, put them into the Rose Bowl against Wisconsin, where UCLA wound up losing to Wisconsin 38-31. Okay. As for the Wildcats, well, they got denied the Rose Bowl bid, but they didn't go home empty-handed. They got themselves a trip to the Holiday Bowl against the Nebraska Cornhuskers. And man, was this a close game or what? Wildcats, this was December 30th, 1998. Wildcats came out with a 23-20 win over the Cornhuskers. They went into this bowl game number 5 in the country, and after everything was done, Wildcats finished 12-1 with a number 4 ranking in the national rank. They finished with a number 4 ranking overall. And guess what? They eventually finished with a better record than UCLA because of that goddamn bowl game. All right? Those are my 5 favorite college football seasons, okay? So, to recap, all right? Number 5 was the 2009 season. Number 4, 2014. Number 3, 2023. Number 2, 1993, Desert Swarm. And the number 1, 1998, the 12-1 season. So, those are my 5 favorite seasons the Arizona Wildcats have played during their time in the Pac-12. So what are your favorite seasons? Did any of them make the list? Did any of them not make the list? Okay? Discussion is open. Leave your feedback in the comment section below, but do keep your comments in the boundaries of good taste. Till the next time we meet, Mr. Wildcat, remind you to bear down, to be good, be careful, and behave. Rawr.